Down the corridor of the Führerbunker, an SS guard knocks once, then opens the door to find a sudden silence behind layers of concrete and smoke. Adolf Hitler. April 30th, 1945, Berlin. His death on April 27th, 1945, Berlin was in chaos. Soviet artillery pounded the city relentlessly. Hitler, now isolated and aging rapidly, remained in the bunker situated beneath the Reich Chancellery. The location had become a tomb-like command post. Inside, his remaining inner circle, Joseph Goebbels, Martin Bormann and others, moved about in near silence, aware that time was disappearing. By then, Germany's military situation was beyond recovery. The Western Allies had crossed the Elbe. The Soviet Union controlled large sections of the city. Communications were failing. Outside the bunker, SS divisions and Wehrmacht units had either disintegrated or defected. Hitler had already dismissed most options of retreat or escape. The bunker was both fortress and prison. On the evening of April 28th, Hitler heard devastating news. SS leader Heinrich Himmler had opened negotiations with the Western Allies through Count Volker Bernadotte of Sweden. The betrayal affected Hitler deeply. He immediately ordered the arrest of Himmler. Hermann Fegelein, a liaison for Himmler and brother-in-law to Eva Braun, was also detained in Berlin. He was found attempting to flee and executed soon after, under direct orders from the Führerbunker. There was no mercy for betrayal. At the same time, Hitler was finalizing his last political document, his last will and his personal testament. He dictated both in the presence of his secretary, Traudl Juncker, and others, in the early hours of April 29th. In the documents, he named Goebbels as Reich Chancellor and Admiral Karl Dönitz as president. He denounced Himmler and Göring, calling them traitors. Eva Braun was with him in the bunker, having refused to leave Berlin. She had arrived days earlier with no official status, but resolved to stay until the end. Around 1 a.m. on April 29th, Hitler and Braun were married in a brief civil ceremony held in the map room. Witnessed by close aides and ministerial staff, it was more ritual than celebration. Champagne was served shortly afterward, according to survivors, and the couple shared what would be their final hours alive together. 24 hours before death, the situation above ground was collapsing. The Soviets continued tightening their grip on central Berlin. Gunfire could be heard even inside the sealed walls of the Führerbunker. Gasoline shortages, shortages of food, electricity blackouts, all were now daily realities. Hitler was seen walking the narrow passageways of his underground quarters, increasingly hunched, one arm trembling uncontrollably, a sign of advanced neurological deterioration. Late on April 29th, Hitler received confirmation that Benito Mussolini had been captured and executed by Italian partisans. His body mutilated and publicly displayed. Several witnesses in the bunker recalled Hitler showing a copy of the newspaper with Mussolini's body hanging upside down. That image sealed his resolve. By dawn on April 30th, Hitler gave orders for the method of death, suicide by pistol combined with cyanide. He gave specific instructions that both his and Braun's remains were to be burned immediately after. He summoned those closest to him, Bormann, Goebbels, Juncker, and others. He informed them of his imminent death and dismissed them, instructing them to flee or surrender as best they could. Goebbels refused to leave. Juncker recalled quiet resignation rather than panic. Hitler's dog, Blondie, was poisoned with cyanide by his physician, Dr. Ludwig Stumpfegger, as a final test on the capsules. By mid-morning, the sounds of the Soviet advance grew louder. Outside, Berlin was burning. Inside, time was marked by ritual. At roughly 1 p.m., Hitler had a final meal, a modest lunch with Braun. He reportedly ate very little. Witnesses described the mood as grim but calm. Shortly after, he spoke briefly with staff one last time, offering formal thanks. Then he withdrew to his private quarters with Braun. The doors were closed behind them. In the final hour, the bunker grew utterly still. At approximately 3:30 p.m., a shot rang out. Those gathered outside the room waited minutes before cautiously entering. Hitler was slumped on the sofa, a bullet wound to his right temple. Braun was beside him, dead from cyanide. As per his instruction, aides wrapped their bodies in blankets, carried them up the emergency exit to the courtyard of the Reich Chancellery, and poured gasoline over them. The corpses were lit on fire under artillery shells and machine gun fire. The fire struggled to consume them fully. Bormann and others guarded the smoldering remains briefly before returning underground. The cratered city continued collapsing above. Within 24 hours, Soviet troops would take full control of the Chancellery ruins. The war in Europe would end in less than 10 days. Karl Dönitz from the north assumed control of what remained of the German state. And below Berlin, the silence of the Führerbunker hardened into the weight of history. The legacy of those last 72 hours remains as a testament to the destruction wrought by absolute power unchecked, leaving generations to grapple with its historical and psychological aftermath.